Okay, so it's time now for our opening keynote interview. But before we say hello to our guests this morning, I'd like to spend a minute introducing the business they represent, as there's quite a lot to wrap your head around. Are you ready? And in fact, tech team, you could bring on our guests if you like. It'd be nice to see them reacting to my description of their business. John Baumback and Anne-Marie Conway. And okay, so hello, good morning, by the way. How are you?
Hi, morning, Penny. All good?
Good. Yeah, I'm terrific. Thank you. I am looking forward to describing your business, and you tell me if I've got this right, because it's quite complicated, isn't it? So, Seetec, SEETEC, not SEA. It's nothing to do with marine business. Let's just clear that up. Has been trading for 35 years and is the 16th largest employee-owned business in the country, with its 2,500 employees owning 51% of the business. So what does Seetec do? Well, I'm going to have a go at this. Bear with me, broad ranging. Okay, ready? First off, there's Seetec Outsource. Now, this is to do with apprenticeship training and adult education. And then there's Seetec Plus. And this supports people to find work and develop in their careers. And they've got 60 centres nationwide with 500,000 people supported into work. Not only that, Seetec Plus has helped 5,000 employers to become disability confident. Next, thirdly, Seetec Ireland. That's an employability and skills service. And then Seetec Justice. Now that's a public sector business, sort of private business offering public sector probation services and employment for people in prison. And a couple of the Seetec's Justice staff have recently received the prestigious Butler Trust Award for their work. So it's a solid, good stuff that. Are you still with me? Because last and not least, there's the fifth business to mention under the Seetec umbrella, and that's a mattress manufacturing company. Yes, mattresses. Vicepring mattresses are top end, dead posh, really super comfy. The firm, no mattress pun intended, by the way, the firm, get it, was given the Queen's Award for Enterprise in 2012, so that's not bad. John Baumback and Anne-Marie Conway, have I just about covered everything?
Yep, just about. We do also make park benches and shred paper securely for organisations as well. So, but most of it, you've got it pretty well spot on.
All right, it's broad ranging, and that must bring its own challenges when it comes to being EO. But what's the overlap? There's a theme really running through all of the pillars of your business, aren't there? Talk us through, tell us what you do from the human perspective, not just me describing.
So we deliver social value. That's really what we're about. And a lot of people have got different views about what social value is and how you articulate it. I like to look at it in terms of comparing value with social value. So if you imagine that a child this Christmas, let's say a girl, she wants her phone, and she wants that as a present, and we know how empowering that phone will be for her and how life-changing it will be. But the people that we work with, that little girl that we work with, she might actually get a present this Christmas, or she may get a proper meal on Christmas Day, or she may have somewhere to live on Christmas, or most of all, she may see both her parents because they didn't actually have to be in prison for that Christmas. So that's how we measure ourselves, and that's the work that we do. So it's improving lives.
Great. Okay. And the mattress and the park bench.
With Vicepring, we actually manufacture the frames for Vicepring beds, and that factory there is all the staff in that factory are from disadvantaged backgrounds. So the staff that we're employing there wouldn't probably get a job otherwise. So we're actually integrating those individuals back into the community and having a real sense of purpose. And some of those people have been with the organisation 20 years. It's not just a job for them. It's what they do. It's vocation.
Okay. And Anne-Marie, would you say that Seetec is a complex business given the list of services and products that I mentioned?
Yeah, definitely. I think to explain Seetec to somebody who doesn't know us is not straightforward. You can't sum us up in one or two sentences, like scientific equipment, like ABBA yesterday, or like Rutherford. But I think the essence of what we do is just as John described, which is about social value, and that our ethos has always been, in our 35-year history, to empower people to take responsibility for their lives, and that's really the thread that runs through the business.
Okay, so let's just go back to basics, John. You joined Seetec in 1984, didn't you? And you've been
That's
with
right,
the firm. You joined on a youth training scheme, and then you became chief executive. I mean, that's an advert for youth training schemes, isn't it? If ever I saw one.
Yes, it is. I'm proud to have been at the company that long. I was the 7th person ever to be employed, but I was given those opportunities as well, Penny, and that's the important thing to recognise. But yeah, that's exactly what we do. So
Okay.
I'm proud to be leading the Neo business.
So talk us through Seetec's journey to becoming employee owned, because you didn't join in 84 and get given some sort of ownership, did you? It was privately owned before that, wasn't it? And then how did it become employee owned?
So our founder, Peter Cooper, was thinking about retirement and looking at options. And we're a public services business, and at the moment, you don't read a lot about negativity on public service contract businesses, but there's plenty around. And he was acutely aware of what may happen in the future. So the long-term viability of the business and safeguarding that business in the future was paramount importance to him. So in 2017, he started looking at his future and planning to move to employee ownership. And the name for it was Project Pepper. In 2017, he was 64. So when I'm 64 and the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's was the inspiration for that. So and it was fast moving. Let's put it that way. So I found out about our move to employee ownership on the 12th of August 2019. So that's pretty much etched in my mind. And from that date, Peter and I worked together to move the business to employee ownership, including obviously calculating the finance and working out the structure and what we would put in place and how it would look, including his wishes and including all that moves. And so from that date, August 2019, we actually completed the whole transaction and moved in January 2020 this year. So it was fast paced.
I mean, that somebody has once said work does expand to fill the time. But if you remember from Monday's interview, Rutherford, they actually started looking at EO in 2005, and it took about 10 years to, think about it, progress that, and then action it. But this is an extraordinary distance of short period of time. What support did you have? Where did you get your support from to do this? The legal stuff, the governance, the finances. I mean, it must have blown your mind with all the stuff to think about.
So there's a mixture there. Look, we had good advisors in all areas. We had a good legal team. We had a corporate finance team as well, and we had consultants that you all know. One of your headliners helped as well. It is worth saying that Seetec changes and it evolves every few years because we run contracts that have a limited time. One of our great strengths is reinventing. So for us, it was fast paced and it was at times overwhelming, but it's what we do, and we set ourselves those challenging targets, and you have to deliver them. But I know that you're talking a lot more to Anne-Marie in a while, so I don't want to steal her thunder. But for me, Anne-Marie, by my side, has been instrumental in that move to employee ownership, and a lot of the things that we've achieved, we wouldn't have done without her support.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, I want to ask you about your role actually, because it's quite unusual to have an associate director for employee ownership specifically. So that's your title. What has that involved? What's it been like from where you're sitting?
So as John said, there was this huge wave of activity that started for me at the end of last year. So John and Peter did a lot of work up to November in terms of the legals and the governance. And then Peter and John approached me last November about taking this on as a full-time role. So when I became involved in November, the work up to January to the announcement was just around getting ready and doing that work, which was hectic. But from January onwards, it's been about setting up the structure and all the stuff you would have heard about from the participants over the last few days, structure, councils, elected representatives, getting those people involved and engaged in employee ownership in our business. And just reflecting back, I suppose, on the few months leading up to January, I think John would feel this too. There was a constant, I'll call it a tension between wanting to come up with all of the answers and have a complete product ready on the 10th of January versus the ethos of employee ownership is that the business is now in our employees' hands, and therefore it's for those employees to make some of those decisions. So we resisted the temptation to put all of the answers in place straight away. Instead, we had a broad framework of what we felt we needed to achieve. And then we did the work from January after the announcement to engage our people to get involved in making those decisions and really fleshing it out.
And what is the structure like? How does it work for Seetec? Just explain, structurally, and where you are now with that.
Yeah, so Seetec, as you said, has 5 different businesses within kind of the overall organisation. And our senior leadership team is our group exec board. So they are the people who are charged with running the organisation on a day-to-day basis. And what we wanted to do with employee ownership was not have it as something that kind of sat alongside the business, but was absolutely embedded in the heart of the organisation and could bring its influence, our employees' influence, into the decision-making at the heart of the business. So there's 2 aspects to our structure, really. We have a model which we call 60-10-1, which is 1 employee trustee director, which most people on this call will be familiar with. And that person sits in terms of on the employee ownership trust. We have 10 employee councillors who are elected from all aspects of our business. And then we have 60 employee champions. And they are the people who really support the employee council. They're the eyes and ears of the business. Because we knew at the beginning, asking 10 employees to support and represent 2,500 people was too big an ask, along with their day job. So the employee champions are there to support each of the employee council members to do their role. And then in addition to that, we made sure that our employee council and our trustee director were embedded in the heart of the organisation. So our employee council members, there's 2 for each pillar, and they attend and are part of the senior leadership team meetings in each of those pillars. And then our employee trustee director also attends and is a member now of our group executive board. So we're getting champions involved in the organisation, the employee councillor and our employee trustee director. So it just doesn't sit on the side as an employee council, which we just tap into. It's at the heart of the business.
So 60 champions, 10 on the council, 2 from each area of the business, and 1 elected trustee director. And is that about right, do you think, so far for a business your size with 2,500 employees? Do you need more? Do you need less? What do you think? What's your hunch so far? Because it's early days, obviously.
It is. I mean, we only became employee owned in January, and here we are in November. And ultimately, I'm sure John would say this, ultimately the employee council will decide eventually if that structure is right for the business, and we'll be led by that. I think our champion network with our council has been brilliant, actually. It's been the most useful part of the process. And I think the council would say they couldn't do what they do without the champions. That formal peer-to-peer network that we have now at Seetec. So Seetec's always been about its people. The people are driven by the work they do. We've always had that feel. But to have that formally structured has been a revelation, really. And we're finding already benefits from having that peer-to-peer network and that champion involvement in our business.
And I think it's also worth saying there that a lot of people talk about the apprehension of employee ownership from middle management and senior management. And I'd be lying if I said to you that there wasn't that apprehension at first. But now what we're seeing is senior and middle management engagement with employee champions. And so they're helping drive through the changes that we need to make, especially this year. It's been a tough year for all of us. And they've been instrumental in helping us make the changes that we've needed. And actually, you could argue we're oversubscribed with champions now. Some of the pillars have got more champions than we originally envisaged because people want to do that role. They want to be engaged with the workings of the business and they want to really make that difference now.
I suppose it's a test of time, isn't it, that employees begin to understand, and then middle management and senior management begin to understand that two-way communication and that listening and asking piece does work, because we have, obviously all of us, I'm sure at some point, have had experience of organizations where it's just seen as lip service. It's just like, oh, well, they're asking us what we think, but they're never going to do anything with it. What's the point? So it can actually backfire. You mentioned when we had a chat about a month ago, John, about how you said people think it's all bike sheds in Bristol, at the Bristol site. Can we have bike sheds? Can we have better sandwiches in the canteen, that sort of thing? But it's more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Anne-Marie and I have been really keen to make sure that the employee council and the employee champions don't turn into an employee forum. I think it's always worth remembering that senior management and managers throughout the business are employee owners too, and they have the same rights and views as any other employee owner. And I can remember talking to one of my senior team about the council elections, and he was saying to me who he would like to be on that council for the business that he runs, not really remembering that actually he had a voice too. And I think that that's a trap, if you like, that we're really keen to make sure we don't do, that we steer it away from the day-to-day running of the business, like the bike checks in Bristol, as I call it, because that should be that's a matter of course. Employee ownership is about driving the business and having that common goal, not about pay and negotiating benefits. It's much more than that. It's about the future of the organisation. And for us right now, look, you're right, it is the test of time. But also the staff themselves, our colleagues, this is all new for them. It's a new time for us. We haven't got all the answers, and neither have they. So it's beholden on Anne-Marie and I as well to help forge that journey with them.
Anne-Marie, I'd like you to just tell us more about, because we've had a question in from the audience, and also I am keen to know this. How did you identify your champions and the council members? Did you hold auditions? How did it go? What was the process there? And what advice would you give to others, members?
Anything we had planned, I suppose loosely in my head, would have been long before any of us heard of COVID. So all our original plans were really quickly shelved, and we had to adapt and think of another approach. But to start with, we did lots of internal communications about looking for champions. On the back of the employee ownership announcement, we asked people to step forward if they were interested in becoming advocates of us and becoming employee champions. And we had a really good response. And then we went to each business leader of each pillar and asked them to choose 12 people from that list who were a fair representation of the business in terms of its geography, job roles, gender, diversity, to make sure we had a good split of people. And so from those conversations, we ended up with 60 champions. And then we spent some time, literally at the beginning of the pandemic, from March through to early May, doing workshops with those champions where we came together. We saw each champion twice. We ran 10 workshops in total. And it was about discussing what we thought employee ownership meant to us, what the role of the employee champion should be. So that's coming back to what I said earlier about us not having a role definition of that employee champion early on. We worked together collaboratively to come up with that role summary. And that was great because actually we've also committed to doing 6 monthly catch-ups and development sessions with our champions. And we've done that just recently. And we've gone back and looked at that role profile and we still feel that it's right for us. So we had our 60 employee champions out of those workshops. And then we asked people, because we were talking about the employee council and what that would look like. We asked them, were any of them interested in stepping forward to become employee council members? And so from those 60, 20 people said, yes, I'd like to do that. And we held elections, all online over 3 days. We had 2 weeks of campaigning. We had people conducting candidate cafes, employee ownership question time. We had people filming short videos and sharing those. It was a really engaged campaign over 2 weeks. The election happened over the 3 days, and then we virtually opened the ballot boxes and found our 2 employee council members per pillar at the end of that process.
And how regularly will you repeat that process? I mean, I'm sure the champions will need reinvigorating at some point, the pipeline refreshing somehow. And how long does a council, one of the 10 council members, how long do they stand in post for?
So the council are elected for 2 years. And I think somebody spoke yesterday about having to think about if anyone steps down or if you need to conduct by-elections. So we might need to do that. But at the moment, all of those council members will be there for 2 years. And we'll be talking to them about how to roll some of those people off and on so we don't lose them all at the same time. The champions is a different role. You don't stop being a champion. In fact, I think John and I would have the ambition that we grow that championship group and we have more people who are champions. And in fact, that's been happening. One of our pillars, Seetec Plus, has recently taken on quite a large contract and has recruited a big number of people. So we've just expanded the champions in that area already.
I see. So it is a kind of expand and contract to the champions and the representatives within the business, depending on how that business is shaping at the moment. And talking of shaping, actually, we've had a question saying it sounds like you took a shaping approach to the roles of the champions, which is similar to what we heard about in one of the sessions yesterday from BCS Consulting. Yeah. Is that a good approach? Did you find that? Would you advise people take that shaping approach at the beginning?
I think it depends how much the business is comfortable or confident with employee ownership. There was a real appetite for it in our business. There was a lot of interest. There wasn't a lot of knowledge. So the purpose of those sessions for us was just to talk more about employee ownership and some of the mechanics of what it meant at Seetec. And then out of that, decide what do we want to do in terms of the role of the employee champion and the role of the council. What we already had and was different to BCS yesterday was they used those shaping sessions to determine what the structure would be. Whereas we started with our 60-10-1 and embedding people into our senior leadership meetings. We already had that high-level framework, and what we wanted our champions to do was to think about what went alongside of that. I think what BCS were talking about yesterday was literally bringing people together to talk about what the structure would be. And that's a great approach too. I think John and Peter and I felt that in a business of 2,500 people across the UK and Ireland, that wasn't going to work for us. We needed some framework work to start with.
And I think Anne-Marie's also...
Go ahead.
Sorry, Penny, I was just going to add that our employee champions as well, we wanted to broaden that role slightly. So some of our champions have got what we call portfolios. So we've got some that lead for us on environment or diversity or other areas that as champions, as employees, they're really passionate about. And so they join that up through our governance as well and give us a sort of common voice across the business. As you said, it's a complex business, and getting agreement sometimes is difficult. And the champions, because they're horizontal across the business, give us that holistic view of what's happening as well.
We've got a question from the audience for you both. With the executive and trust board designed to play separate roles, what does having the employee trustee, the one, on the executive board, does that blur their role at all? How does that work? You talked a lot about the champions and about the council representatives. This elected trustee director, how does that fit in? How does it work?
Do you want me to go around? So the trustee sits on the group executive board. When we move to employee ownership, we basically transferred the power of running the business on a day-to-day basis to that executive board. So they are an equal member of that board with voting rights. They're a main group exec board member. So they get to really hear and participate in the decisions that we're making, the direction of the business, and what the strategy is. So it's a key role for us. Obviously, they will also sit on the council as well. From the trustee perspective, that separate trust, that's about ensuring that the obligations of the trust itself are met. So they are a director of that as well. So for us, they're distinct. They're distinct roles, and they hold both. I hold both as well. I'm on the trust as well with that trustee director and other NEDs, including the founder. So it is different. I suppose in a PLC it would be sort of a governance board, that trustee, to ensure that we're meeting the trustee obligations, but actually the drive of the business on a daily basis sits at that GEB, and that's what the employee director is there to help us do.
Okay, I hope that's answered. Anne-Marie.
Oh, sorry. So in terms of timescales, we had the champions come on stream first. We then elected the employee council, which coincided for us along with Employee Ownership Day in June. And then we made a decision not to elect the employee trustee director straight away. It seemed like our people and our council have been such a huge journey in a short space of time that everyone wanted to settle into the council role and understand what the responsibility of the employee trustee director was. So we then, together as a council, shaped the role of what we thought the trustee director would look like. And we pushed the election of that role into September. So the employee council voted for their employee trustee director. Again, that was fantastic. And I know when I spoke to you, Penny, last month, and this was the case, we talked about getting people to come forward and put their names into a hat for these roles. And this was replicated for us from champions to council, even to the trustee director, which is that you always get one or two people who are very keen and put their hat in the ring straight away and say, this role is for me, and that's brilliant. But there are a whole level of people just beneath that are much quieter, but reflective, and they're some of the people you really want to tap into. And what I noticed and I observed with you previously was a lot of the people who came forward straight away and had that confidence, where are men? And that the women sometimes were slightly more hesitant and were thinking about the numerous priorities they would have to juggle and didn't want to be seen to be doing a bad job. So we made sure we approached lots of different people from a whole range of backgrounds and just said, we think you'd be good at this. Would you be interested in stepping forward? And as a result of that, we got good diversity within our champions, our council, and ultimately within our trustee director. So that trustee director is female, and she's now sitting on our group executive board. And I think already, even though it's early days for our trustee director, we're seeing great benefits from having an employee voice at a senior level of the organisation.
And of course, having those people visible, act as instant role models to the whole cohort of people who are possible elected members or champions, to think that they could also in the future be one of those people. I've heard from headhunters in the past that it takes 4 times as many phone calls to get a woman to answer the call about, well, look, we've got a top job for you. Are you interested? And quite often she won't reply. Or is it for me? Or do they mean me? I'm sure not. But the fellas tend to pick up the phone straight away and go, "Yep, I'm here. Hire me whenever you want." So, and the same with panel, panel discussions. Same with anything. People tell me, "Oh, it's really hard work getting a woman on a panel." But actually, if it's hard work, then work harder at doing that. And I think that's exactly what you've done, isn't it? You've worked hard at achieving a diverse representation across your employees. You must be very proud of that.
I am, but I think it didn't feel like hard work. It just felt it's the heart of the values of Seetec. If we represent a whole range of people in our communities and we do work with them about engaging people back into employment or skills or life away from prison, then we should be doing, at the very least, the most to engage our own people within our own business and get a broad range of representation. So it felt very natural. And ultimately, people don't need too much coercing. It wasn't coercing, but they just needed a bit of encouragement. They are skilled and they have the right values.
Okay, so you talk about encouragement and getting the right skills on board. We've had a question here from Robert Postlethwaite. I think that must be the Postlethwaite himself. If the directors were to underperform, whose responsibility would it be to address this problem? Do directors underperform as a group, or is it just individuals? I mean, how would you address it? All sounds like the garden is rosy at the moment, but anticipating problems ahead, what might you do to navigate those?
I would like to think that we would address it like any other company. I suppose I'd be very worried that the employee owners as a group, and that would include managers as well, would feel that we're not addressing underperformance in a certain director. I think that you need strong leadership and management to ensure that you tackle those problems before it becomes an issue for the employee owners, to be honest. And one of the things that you've got to have there is honesty and integrity throughout the organisation, and do as you say. In our employee engagement survey that we've done, trust and respect and belief in senior management, is going up since employee ownership. And I think that's important, that employee owners see that you're making decisions and you're tackling the tough decisions as well, rather than putting them off or sweeping them under the carpet. That's the way I think that we should tackle it. I haven't really answered it because we're not there, but I'd like to think that we're addressing that before that becomes an issue throughout the group, because then ultimately I'm failing too.
It's interesting, isn't it? We heard on Tuesday from Guy Singh-Watson at Riverford how he had to probably develop as a person quite substantially from the way he operated before. What sort of, and this is a question we've had from the audience, whilst you're shaping culture, are you spending time developing leadership to kind of get out from under this idea that you cascade information down, you command and control, because that's what we've always done? What sort of development have you had in order to be able to listen and have difficult conversations, even though we're all in this together, that sort of thing? Is it a different style of leadership that you've had to develop?
John might have a different view, but sorry, John. I feel that as a business, we are lucky to have a strong leadership team. And we were clear, I think, early on that there would be some squeeze in different places where, employee ownership is a great thing for Seetec. It was really warmly welcomed by nearly most of our people, and also our leadership team. But we were also honest and understood that this wouldn't be right for some. And I think what's been encouraging for me is that over the last few months, as the model has really taken root, there have been a few little pockets here and there where middle managers, for example, some have felt a bit ruffled or a bit uncomfortable. And I think that's great. I think it shows that the challenge is coming, because what's happening is that the employee owners are being able to challenge and being able to say what they are seeing or hearing. And for those few managers in our business who probably did operate on a command and control structure, or that was their area of comfort. This model doesn't sit well for them. And I think John would agree that if it's uncomfortable, that's a good thing. It should be uncomfortable for them. And we do a lot of work in terms of a management development academy internally to develop the right skills for our managers and for our pipeline. And I hope we'll be able to correct that. But ultimately, if employee ownership isn't comfortable for you, then this isn't the right business for you.
Okay, so if you're just joining us on the call, we are with Seetec's MD, John Baumback, and its Associate Director for Employee Ownership, Anne-Marie Conway at Seetec. Please keep asking questions and upvoting them. There's plenty more to talk about. I'm really keen to understand, Anne-Marie and John, about the day you signed the deal, January 2020, to become employee owned. Then just 2 months later, we're into a global pandemic and a lockdown. Well, that's still going on, basically. So how have the new owners of the business, all 2,500 of them, risen to the challenges of that? Because obviously there will have been a slowdown, I would imagine, in prison services and probation there, offices having to close, retail, manufacturing. You cover a lot of things that probably were heavily affected by the lockdown and by the pandemic, of course. How have you managed? What have your challenges been?
Huge challenges, Penny. As you said at the beginning, it's 5 very different businesses. So we've been affected across the spectrum of issues, if you like. So we've had to furlough staff. We've had to go through redundancies in some parts of the business. On the apprenticeship side, we're responsible for cabin crew training for British Airways and EasyJet and Virgin Atlantic. So you can probably tell that took a little bit of a blow during the pandemic. I have to say that colleagues have responded amazingly. Within 4 weeks of lockdown, we'd completely transferred our office-based delivery on Seetec Plus, as an example, to completely remote. We did the same thing in Ireland. We had staff all working remotely, and we've introduced initiatives for those staff as well. One of the things that I was really concerned about was the mental health of employees. We're an organisation that people work for us because it's a vocation for them. It's more than a job, and not having that human interaction on a daily basis really puts pressure on individuals. So we have something called the listening ear that runs now in a lot of the business, where if you're feeling isolated, you can phone. We have quizzes running every week for staff, just one part of the business sort of has a virtual pub meet at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and although that's arguably not business related, those personal interactions are so important to people through there. And we've done amazingly well on the backdrop as well of moving into employee ownership. You've quite rightly touched on probation. We've got a statutory responsibility to ensure that the general public are safe. And so moving to a model there where we're ensuring that we know what probationers are doing remotely, and keeping in touch with them was of paramount importance, as well as making sure all of our staff were safe as well. And I think employee ownership's really played a part there, because we had those champions instilled in the business across it. They've really been instrumental in helping us make those changes and communicating those changes out, and sort of empowering individuals to take the leads on those changes and help us, because they saw the benefits to the business, but also to the service users as well. Anne-Marie,
what about your perspective on the challenges that the pandemic threw at the business? You must have been in shreds at the beginning of all of this, considering the scope of your business.
I mean, it was really hard, and it's been so challenging for so many people this year. I don't want to sort of kind of say, woe is us and it was awful. It was really tricky. And I think ultimately our people were most concerned about the impact on the clients that they serve. That was their main priority. But I also think as an organisation, Seetec, and John referred to this earlier, one of the things we're very familiar with is change and therefore having to be agile. Our contracts, because we deal with a lot of government business, come and go in cycles. So having to stand up contracts very quickly, or ease things out in a structured way, is very familiar practice to us as an organisation. And so therefore our governance structures and our corporate services team were able probably to give a good amount of support to the business to help everyone to adapt to the changing working environment. But in the early days, certainly, of employee ownership and those early champions workshops, it was actually quite nice to spend time on calls face to face with people who were all going, man, what is happening? We are all at home and I didn't see this coming and I'm trying to manage this and manage that, and just take half a day out to talk about something really positive like employee ownership and how we were going to model and mould this new beast we had in the organisation and what we wanted to look like was actually a really positive conversation to be having in the middle of all the other very tricky parts of business.
And presumably moving forward beyond the pandemic in that vision of the future and shaping the organisation to withstand future shocks or future challenges in a really positive way. That's really nice to hear. Of course, it's not just about firefighting, is it? It's the future for the business, which is a really big part of the end.
And it was lovely to think about the future and have a positive hat on in the middle, I think, of March and April in particular, when it was all looking a bit bleak and nobody really knew what this meant and how it was all going to work out. So as difficult and as odd as it was, and we certainly hadn't anticipated doing any of that remotely, it was lovely to bring people together from our teams over 2 countries who generally work in their pillars and up until that point wouldn't have had a lot of contact with each other. Suddenly we had colleagues from Wales, Yorkshire, Cornwall, Ireland, all working together on calls, shaping what it would look like to be in an employee council, which was really positive.
The Chancellor's spending review yesterday, mid-November 2020, is probably the last opportunity he's got to flesh out some spending that he'll be doing. One of the responses that's been established is to offer a kickstart and a restart support for people out of work, unemployment levels are rising. There are opportunities there for you, aren't there? So are you nimbly able to respond to opportunities that come up, as negative as they are, obviously, for many, many people? But that's your business, isn't it? It's supporting people out of work and into work.
Yeah. So that's underpinned by a framework with the Department of Work and Pensions. So we knew that announcement was on the horizon. Obviously, we didn't know the size. We're already running JETS, the Job Entry Targeted Scheme in the Southwest. So the first pandemic response we're running, and I think Anne-Marie referred to it before, we've taken on about 400 staff in the last 3 months as well to start that up, and that's already having benefits. Some of the people that have been affected by the pandemic are now working for us as advisors, getting other individuals affected back into work. So that's quite rewarding. But yes, we are well placed. But those, what Rishi Sunak announced, that's a 3-year program. So going back to our cycles, if we're successful in those, it will be short and sharp. In real terms, it'll be 3 years. We'll probably need to employ hundreds of staff and then restructure the business again in 3 years. But sadly, one of the truisms about Seetec is that we win more contracts when the country's not necessarily doing so well. It's just the nature of the work we do. Sadly, the more people that are affected, the more individuals that we have to help. It's the nature of our business.
Presumably, you'd like to do yourself out of work, in an ideal world, wouldn't you? But So question that's come up. How has the move to EO gone down with your clients? We assume that most of them are government, most of them are public sector. What's been the response there? Had they even heard of EO? Talk us through that bit. It's quite interesting to see how you might be perceived by public sector.
So our two major commissioners looking at, well, sorry, I should include Seetec Ireland as well. Three major commissioners. If we start with Ireland, they were delighted that Irish employees of a UK business are now part owners of a service that's being delivered to unemployed individuals in Ireland. So they've really warmly welcomed that change. And it breaks down, I think, for all of them, it breaks down those barriers about the nasty private sector making huge profits. And DWP, one of our commissioners, was instrumental in setting Remploy up originally as an employee-owned business, and so was actually really delighted that they would have an employee-owned business in their portfolio delivering those services. And that was the same for the Ministry of Justice as well. It's a different slant, isn't it? I think one of the things that us employee-owned businesses share is the social value side. We do it because we believe in it, and we believe in the good that we're doing for the country and for our people. And our commissioners can see that about us. They can see that about the organisation that we are, and it differentiates us from private equity, which is certainly around in our businesses. And I know one of your speakers mentioned venture capitalists yesterday, and that's the same in ours. And we've got large PLCs as well as charities. And for me, we're offering something new to our sector, and whilst not a unique approach, a sort of a refreshing approach as well. For me, charities don't own caring and social value about individuals. We've just got that right as well. But what it does mean is that our people shape the future, and our commissioners are seeing that, and they're seeing that we're paying attention to what our people are saying now, and that they have a voice. And actually, it isn't about shareholder value. Yeah, Penny, I know your background. Shareholder value has driven some quite perverse decisions in businesses, and I'm fortunate enough that I don't have to worry about that being the sole driver to what we do. And commissioners can see that, and that's really important. That it's not about how much money is going to a bunch of shareholders in a foreign country.
And do you think that helps give Seetec the competitive edge? Do you think EO can potentially give Seetec the competitive edge? Yes,
I do. Absolutely. We took a decision early on, Peter and I, we discussed it, and I'm sure there's other individuals that are listening now that are faced with this decision. And for us, it was relatively simple about where the trust should be. Should it be in the UK or should it be offshore? Because there are tax benefits. And we took the decision, Peter and I, that it had to be onshore. We have to pay our taxes. And I often say that, I'm happy to pay my taxes, and I'm happy Seetec does, because it pays for the schools and hospitals in this country. And private business is not respected enough for what we do for the economy. And for me, having that transparent structure that commissioners can see and say, first of all, you're committed to your people, your profits aren't going abroad, they're being reinvested, is hugely compelling, I would say. They know where the money's going, and they know that we're here for a purpose, not just for profit.
And that's quite the tell of an EO business, is that it doesn't have that short-term pressure from private equity or venture capitalist investors or stock market investors, which has a short-term churn on reinvesting and all the rest of it. And the agenda just seems to be different entirely. So much so that, even having Anne-Marie in post, I mean, your job title just doesn't sort of happen in many other places, obviously. But, the whole point that you're dedicated as an internal resource to EO, has that also been a key ingredient of your success so far in EO, your enjoyment of it? Do you think, or you could have done it off the side of your desk?
No, I honestly admire all the businesses I listen to who have someone who tags this work onto an already full-time job. I am in awe of you. I don't know how you managed to do that successfully, because I knew that the first few months would be busy as we set up the structure. Then I naively thought to myself, well, I'm sure the back end of the year will be much quieter. It's full-time. It is more than full-time. It is flat out. And what it's allowed us to do, I think it speaks a lot to, Peter's legacy was that he wanted us not just to be an employee-owned business, but to be a really good gold standard employee-owned business. And we were able to say to our people earlier on, the people who were cynical and said, well, how is this going to be different for me? Was that the business invested not only in advice and guidance from experts outside the organisation, they also invested in this role that I do and the salary that goes with it, to allow us to have a focus on employee ownership at Seetec. And I think because that role exists, we've been able to accelerate a lot of activity over these 12 months, particularly during the pandemic. I think had we not had this role, anybody else doing their usual full-time job wouldn't have got close to this with all the other challenges that would have come along in 2020. So,
And do you see your role existing forever, or do you think you'll be out of a role as soon as EO is set up more substantially, or has got a lot more time under its belt at Seetec?
Yeah, I think we've still got quite a bit of work to do, but I think the role is also starting to now drift into work we're doing on a formal social value governance piece inside the organisation. That's a really good example of how we've used our champions in the business. So Seetec wanted to set up a formal governance structure for social value. So we do loads of social value activity within the organisation, but we have governance boards for risk and finance. So the business wanted to have something similar for social value, which I think, again, speaks to the quality of the organisation. But rather than a few senior people coming up with that strategy in a dark room somewhere, we've brought in our champions from all over the organisation. People, as John said, who have an interest in community affairs, environmental and sustainability issues, and social value. And they are in working groups now coming up with what they think Seetec should be accountable for, where we should be keeping our focus, and what it is that Seetec should be driving towards in terms of social value. And their contributions will directly contribute towards the formal governance board we will have, the strategy we'll have at the end of this. And they will have participation in that board and hold us to account for it. So I can see the role growing, but I think this, I can't believe I'm saying this, there's still an awful lot to do with employee ownership. We're not there yet.
Well, I think Riverford and other instruments, yes. Sorry, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, I can't see a time personally where we won't need Anne-Marie. One of my fears would always be drift, and making sure that employee ownership is always at the heart of what we're doing, rather than that's what we do. I think we've just got to be pushing and driving constantly to see what tomorrow looks like. And without that drive and energy, then it will just become, oh, that's what we are. And I think it's more than that for Seetec.
Mm-hmm. It's EO is something you do, not something you have, I think, is from what I'm hearing. Riverford have expressed that. They're looking at the future of EO at the moment within the business, sort of thinking how they reinvigorate. They're coming through another cycle and need to look at that. And of course, we heard from Aber Instruments, who were EO, but it kind of wasn't really sort of energized within the organization until they got that kind of galvanizing letter saying, can we buy you? And then that kick started kickstarted it. So I think it is a living, breathing thing, isn't it? That always needs attention and something that you do. You don't just have it. It's not a done deal once you've signed over. Are you ready to take a few quick fire questions from the audience? Some of them are technical, some of them are a bit more involved. We've got a few more minutes on the clock before we finish the opening keynote interview. Jake Hallett, how are employee reps split across multiple sites? I think you've answered that in that you've got 2 reps for each pillar of the business. Obviously 2 come from Ireland, Seetec Ireland. I'm interested to know about how you actually manage the communication and what you'll do when everyone's back in offices. Will you still hit the Zoom to get together occasionally when you need to?
So John was really clear about his vision with this, was that our employee council members are, you know, critical to the success of the organisation. Our vision would always be that we would meet face to face, and the employee council themselves at their very first meeting, when we were determining some of these things like how and when we'll meet, all agreed that we will move to different parts of the business. So the employee council will meet currently once every 2 months. It'll move to once every 3 months, but it will move around the organisation, UK and Ireland, to different locations, to the places where we deliver probation services, to the place where we make bed frames, to our locations in Ireland, so that our employee council are getting to understand and see the breadth of the business and meet colleagues. So it's our intention to try and do as much as we can of that once restrictions lift. But at the moment, like everyone else, everything's on Teams, and it's working pretty well.
Okay. John, what would you have done differently, if anything? Deb Oxley's asking that. You've got a bit of hindsight. You've got almost 11 months under your belt with EO. What would you have done differently? Anything, or have you done it just right?
That's really difficult. I think I genuinely can't think of what we've done differently. I would have liked to have done it in a different environment, though. Under COVID, I think that the team have done a great job. It just would have been nicer to have much more human interaction. I think that the targets that we set ourselves and those stretching targets have, I think have worked well for us, and doing it at pace. I think Penny, when we first met, I talked about making the organisation feel different. And I think it is starting to feel different, so that it feels like an employee-owned business, so that it's not just tomorrow does feel different to today. When we dealt with the union once, the union rep wrote a note to his general secretary when we took over a business saying, "Same message, different suit," and that's not what I wanted Seetec to be. And I think that we've, by and large, we're succeeding with that, but COVID, has not helped this year.
Okay,
I don't know about you,
another quick.
Actually.
Well, another quick question, as we're nearly out of time. Have you started distributing dividends to the staff yet? That's one of the burning questions on the audience. It's really, everyone's keen to know that.
No,
not yet. No. Too soon.
When will it be? When can they get their cash? What's the deal there?
Well, so our first trading year. Sorry, John.
No, go on.
Our first trading year as employee owned is from the 1st of April this year to the 31st of March next. So that's our first full year. So the very first point we could be looking to pay out dividends would be in December next year. However, like lots of organisations, we have had a difficult trading year. So it's, I think, unlikely that we are going to hit that bar we needed to cross in terms of profit to generate money for dividends in our first year. But that's to do with the extraordinary trading conditions this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And companies up and down the country are experiencing the same, aren't they? So it's no surprise, is it, really? Thank you both so much for your time and for letting us into your businesses, really, and have a poke about and ask you loads of different questions about how EO works for Seetec. And interesting, we've had a B2C business with Riverford, a B2B business with the instruments, business with ABBA, and today B2P, business to public sector. I don't know, just something like that. But yeah, it's really nice to hear that difference as well in that marketplace that you're operating. And I wish you all the best with your park benches and your mattress bases and all the winning more awards. I think it's fantastic what you do. And if you look at Twitter, Seetec stories or Seetec Inspire, there are always lots and lots of brilliant stories. Seetec Inspire, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of stories about the good work that Seetec does. So have a check out that. So Anne-Marie Conway, thank you. John Baumback, thank you very much for your time. And that's just about it for this morning session.